Okay, so Rabbi Bar Chana was at sea in a boat and he saw a fish. Well, his crew saw a fish anyway, and they thought it was an island. So they stopped their ship there. How did they get that idea? Okay, so the simple words of the Gemara indicate that there was some dirt and grass on the back of the fish. And so they thought it was an island. This is strange. So the Marsha has a classic explanation. And although Rebbe Nachman does not directly reference the Marsha, it's very difficult not to see the connections between the Marsha's parish and Rebbe Nachman's parish. It's very clear that Rebbe Nachman accounts for the Marsha's explanation. And so we'll briefly review the Marsha's explanation and see then what is Rebbe Nachman saying that is new. So the Marsha explains that the fish was not a real fish, it was a metaphorical fish. And, okay, so now, great, so before they saw a big fish and they thought it was an island, so they stopped their boat and made a life and death decision to stop their boat in the middle of the ocean. Now, much better, I see, it was a metaphorical fish, but they thought a metaphorical fish was an island. It's actually much more difficult to understand the story seemingly after the Marsha's parish, even though what the Marsha said gives us a much deeper understanding than we got from the simple language of the Gemara. So we're certainly not criticizing the Marsha, we're certainly not criticizing the Gemara, but we do see the need that Rebbe Nachman has to offer a further explanation for us to understand at a deeper level what the story is really about. So when the Marsha says that they saw a metaphorical fish, what does he mean by that? He means that they saw the mazel of the month of Adar, which is a fish. And there are two connections between what the Marsha wrote, and I'll quote more exactly some of what he said, and what Rebbe Nachman said. And we already discussed the first connection in depth in the previous year, so I'll briefly mention that and then move on to the second connection between the two explanations, which we had not explained yet. So the Marsha says that the fish is the mazel of the month of Adar, and Adar is when you have a shnasi ibor, when you're going to increase the length of the year, which used to be done by the basin on a regular basis. Nowadays we do it by a mathematical formula by which we can calculate many years out in advance. Either way, it's not simple. It requires extensive learning. When we're going to increase the Jewish year by 1 month, that's how our leap year works, we add a month of Adar. So the month of Adar is connected with the idea of the Ibor. Now previously in Likutei Moharan, before in Torah base, in Sif Zion, before we began the story of Rabbi Bar Chana, Rebbe Nachman discussed the idea that when we go to the city of Mishpat, as we've explained in the parish on Likutei Moharan base so far, we're bringing many souls with us, that we essentially pray our way to this divine location, and we bring souls with us through our learning and our positivity in our learning. And we have to take them to this location in the city of Mishpat called Ibor, where they will receive their rejuvenation, which in the case of our Torah means a new set of emotions, of emotional input, which is more helpful than what they had before. Because emotions can be helpful and also, well, not. Better to have helpful emotions than not. So we have to make it to this location, but the thing about the city of Mishpat is that it's overrun by goons, and so we have to become an authority in that location so we can get the souls to the location called Ibor. So this is a direct connection between what Rebbe Nachman said and what the Marsha said, that they saw the fish, the metaphorical fish representing the month of Adar, and they thought that it was Geula. They thought it was the final redemption, because right after that becomes the month of Nisan, when the Jews famously escaped Mitzrayim in the impoverished slavery state in Mitzrayim. So that's associated with the redemption. And they thought, it's coming really soon, we better stop our boat here. But maybe it was a Shnasi Ibor. Maybe it was a year that was going to have 2 months of Adar, so they were actually a month early for that. It would have been, according to Halacha, a month too early to celebrate Purim fully. And if had they understood that Halacha in the moment, things would have gone better. They wouldn't have stopped at this island. And so one of the major themes of this Torah so far has been the importance of both praying in a fervent way and also learning halacha in depth, and the interplay that these two things have. So that's a brief review of the first connection between the Marsha and Rebbe Nachman. The second connection, in the Marsha, he says about the month of Adar, that they thought this island was a fish, or they thought this fish was an island, and this fish was actually the model of the month of Adar, and before Adar is the rainy season, and after Adar is the sunny season, says the Marsha. Or another way of saying that is that the face, the panim of Adar, was facing backwards, was facing the rainy season of Galus, essentially where we're holding, according to most opinions. And so it seemed like Geula was looking us in the face. And so of course we retracted to that. There's Geula, there's the redemption. And then he says that the back of the month of Adar is facing toward the redemption. So this language is also connected to what Rebbe Nachman says, and we'll continue in the text of Likutei Moharan to see how. And he says, he's quoting the Gemara. This that was said in the Gemara, that Rabbi Bar Chana, one of the great rabbis of the Talmudic era, he was at sea and he saw a fish. It says explicitly that he saw a fish, not that he saw an island, but he saw a fish. So that's where the question arises. And Rebbe Nachman explains, Ki is a code word in Likutei Moharan, meaning you just asked a question, and ki is coming to say what the answer to your question is. And essentially, any question you ask that's sort of related to what was said before is right, and you should try to read whatever comes after ki in Likutei Moharan as though it is answering your question. Try to understand the answer to your question according to the concept that is presented, as we've discussed. Ki b'galuseinu, in our time of Galus, it seems as though Hashem is turning his face away from us, chas v'shalom. And he brings a verse from Tehillim that represents this idea. That you turned your face away. We're saying to Hashem, David Melech is saying to Hashem, and whenever we read this kapitel of Tehillim, we're saying to Hashem that you turned your face away. Shehu b'chinas rachamim. What is the face? It is the attribute of mercy. You turned your mercy away from us. And you showed us the back of your neck, which is the attribute of judgment. So we see a superficially simple connection that the Marsha says this idea of panim v'acher, and also Rebbe Nachman says this idea of panim v'acher, front and back. But hold on. The Marsha said that the month of Adar is facing us, panim, and Rebbe Nachman says, ki b'galuseinu k'v'yachal v'kadosh baruch hu b'histarta panim, sorry. And then he says in the version of Helen, histarta b'necha. Turn his face away. These are opposite explanations. Telling Rebbe Nachman is saying exactly opposite from basically the only explanation that we had prior to this. Now, look, Rebbe Nachman's explanation is very important explanation. Rabbi Bar Chana came to him in dreams and explained to him personally what happened in these stories. And Rabbi Bar Chana looked upset, which is not normal for a yid of that level of holiness to be upset about anything. People are not understanding my stories. It says in the, it might be Sichas Aran, one of the writings of the life story style writings of Rebbe Nachman, that he came to him with shecheres apanim, he came with a blackened face, meaning just like he had a sad expression. It's like people are not understanding my stories. Okay, we have the Marsha, and the Marsha is extremely important. We wouldn't have had Ein Yaakov, which explains most of the Agadas in the Gemara, most of the mystical stories in the Gemara, without the Marsha. So we cannot reject either of these opinions, and even though they seem to directly contradict them, we must work out a resolution. This is Darchei Noyim. This is the peaceful way of the Torah. So, Rebbe Nachman gave us a clue. He referenced a verse in Tehillim. What is the meaning of this verse in Tehillim? He started b'necha. David Melech said, you turn your face from me. So let's look at the original context of this verse and discuss some of the explanations of this verse, and maybe we'll come to understand this seeming stira, the seeming contradiction. It's one of the general rules of Likutei Moharan that Rebbe Nachman accounts for all explanations of everything that he brings, past and future. And so any explanation we read can help us better to understand Likutei Moharan. So the original context of the verse here, I'll just read the verse by itself. Hashem beretzonecha ha'amadata laharidi ois. Hashem, in your will, you stood me up, and it could mean, we'll get to the Mepharshim in a moment, but something having to do with great mountains. And then it says what Rebbe Nachman quoted, Yistarta b'necha, you turned your face away, ha'isi nivhal, and I was shocked, I was worried. So the first part of the verse here, there are also two opposite explanations of this first part of the verse. Seemingly, the simple explanation, according to most of the Pashtani, most of the people who explained, well, simply here's how the story went without reading into it, hidden messages and things like that, goes like this. Hashem b'retzonecha, Hashem, in your great will, you stood me up as though I was a great mountain. Or there's different explanations in the Ibn Ezra, that whether it's you stood me up on great mountains or you stood me up as though I was a great mountain. But the personal experience being conveyed here is that you built me up like I was this great, whatchamacallit, and then you pulled the rug out from under your feet and I was shocked. Then you turned your face away. So that's one explanation. There's another explanation that directly contrasts that, which is the Kabbalistic explanation. I'm going to say it in a relatively non-Kabbalistic way, but I may say it in a more Kabbalistic way. We'll see. It's from a book, Igar the Kala. It's from the students of the Arizal, actually not from the Marachu stream of the Arizal, but some of the earlier students went into Europe. And it says that the hardy ois are actually klipas. And ha'amadata refers to a tzimtzum, where you put me in a state that I was positioned against these hardy ois. That I already knew I was in a state of tzimtzum. I already knew that I was in a compromised state. Now, he says a lot of familiar ideas there, at least in our time, that's familiar since the Baal Shem Tov came out, which is that, okay, when we're in a constricted state, this is actually for our benefit. This is not something that the Baal Shem Tov invented, but it's something that he emphasized heavily. And perhaps his emphasis on this attitude was not an invention, but a novelty. But they're basically the hardy ois, the mountains of might, the mountains of boldness are like sort of an enemy. And then he says, and then you turn your face from me. But even in that explanation, turning your face from me is not so surprising of a thing. The word nivhal seems to indicate that I was surprised, I was shocked. But then, I'll say it a little more Kabbalistically. What it says there in Igar the Kala is, if you take Hashem's four-letter name, Yud, K, Vav, K, the K equals Hey, and you add that value, 26, to the value of if you were to increase each letter in the Aleph base by 1. So Yud becomes Chaf, and Hey becomes Vav, etc. And add those two together with a total B. And then also add, you can do the math yourself on this one, if you do one letter before in the Aleph base. So that Yud would turn into Tes, and Hey would turn into Dalid, and so weiter. And that equals the same gematria as this word Nivhal. So to say that it's not that Hashem disappeared. David HaMelech did not think Hashem disappeared. Simply he hid his face. He did a tzimtzum. He said, let's play a game for a minute. You fight these bad guys. Okay. So these are very different experiences for a number of reasons. In both cases, Hashem sort of removes his superficial show of help. Sort of like a parent with a child who shows the child how to build a certain structure with their blocks a few times and then doesn't help the third time. Okay, your turn. You do it, buddy. Try again. But it doesn't help. It's ostensibly. The child still knows they're there, hopefully. So the first experience is, you built me up like I was this big mountain of glory, and I thought in that case that I was good. And then you surprised me thinking that, oh wow, I guess I didn't, I guess I wasn't so tough after all. That's a very different experience than saying, well, I already know I'm in a tough situation. I already know that Hashem is backing off a little bit in his direct intervention, leaving things a little bit more to the laws of nature for a moment, so that I can sort of train myself. It's hashgacha pratis, but it's enclosed in hashgacha klalis, just like the name Havaya is enclosed in this gematria of nivhal, meaning surprise. These are very different experiences. And so this does not directly answer our question about the seeming contradiction between the Marsha and Rebbe Nachman, but at least it gives us a clue. Oh, I see. So Hastaras Panim, Hashem turning his face away, there's different gradients of that. So perhaps we could explain these two explanations of Rebbe Nachman and of the Marsha according to the idea that they're simply talking about different levels of turning away the face, which would be okay, but that's not what the Marsha says. The Marsha says it's as though it was facing us completely. But think about it for a moment. The idea that I thought I was good, I thought I didn't need additional help. In some ways, that's actually a much darker position than knowing that one needs help. There's different explanations of this idea. It says Choshech Afela, I think is the language, when Hashem made the curse of the double darkness with the Mitzrayim in Egypt, where one darkness was just they couldn't see, and another darkness was they couldn't move. And this is in Musar and Chassidus texts. This is equated to someone who is going the wrong way, and they think it's the right way, which is much darker than someone who simply is going the wrong way, and they understand and they're trying, but it's hard. That's a very honest position, as opposed to one fooling himself. There's another story where someone brought to the Rebbe of Lubavitch a heretical book that they wrote, and they were Jewish, but they went to a different path, and they offered it to Lubavitch. Many people would go to the Rebbe of Chabad, as is commonly known, and offer him books that they wrote. Many were Jewish books, and he would accept the book happily and give them some money to publish their next book and their next book. But this person, he had a different attitude because it was a heretical book, and the guy was open that it was a heretical book. And the Rebbe wished him a refuah shlema, that he should heal. Because, what do you mean? I'm perfectly happy. And so the Rebbe said to him, the greatest sickness is when someone doesn't know that they're sick. So now we can understand a new understanding of the Marsha. We can make a chiddush on the Marsha, and perhaps this was intended by Rebbe Nachman to make this chiddush on the Marsha, because he knew what the Marsha really meant, because he spoke to the original guy who was in the story personally. I'm not saying the Marsha didn't, but we have written record that Rebbe Nachman did. So perhaps when the Marsha says it seemed as though the light was facing them, well, it wasn't really the light. It just looked like the light. Okay, so fine. So that basically solves the lamdus problem of between. And if you go look at the Marsha on the back of the Gemara there, he's usually the second commentary after the Rush in the back. It's fairly easy to see what I've sort of just solved from Rebbe Nachman in the Marsha. But in terms of our avoidance, this is a very difficult message now because it's very confusing. So we need to solve this problem a little bit here, which is that, oh, I see, so you're telling me that sometimes when I'm in trouble, it's a good thing because it's Hashem helping me and training me, and sometimes it's a bad thing because I'm deluding myself. So how do I know? How do I know which is which? So Rebbe Nachman brings in a different Likutei Moharan, I think it's Ayin Daled in Likutei Aleph, another explanation on these same words from the verse, which is, he references the Gemara that says sometimes there's dinim that are good, and or Yisurim is the language of the Gemara there. Sometimes Yisurim that are good, and sometimes Yisurim that are not good. Some that are from a holy source, and some that are not from a holy source. And how do we know? The ones that are from a holy source do not interrupt our ability to pray. And the ones that are from an unholy source interrupt our ability to pray. And so, seemingly, just any difficult situation I'm in, if I should choose to pray in that situation, I would be changing it to a situation that is a source of holy judgment. Even if the situation itself doesn't ostensibly change, I know now that it's coming from a holy source because I've chosen to pray. But now the problem is that someone could be deluded into thinking that I'm good, that I'm on the right path, so I don't need to pray. So that first solution in our avodah wouldn't work, knowing that if I pray, I can turn it into a holy source, because what do I need to pray for? It seems perfectly good to me. So now that we have this knowledge, this specific information, that we had to sort of really dig to get that information. We had to really go. I didn't quite give a halachic drasha here, but we went into Perushim on the Shas that's moving in that direction. It's a halachic style in some ways, drasha. Now that we've dug into the limud in that way, we know about this distinction of situations where we have to pray, where they affect our prayer in situations where we don't. So now we know that even when things are good, we have to pray, and we have a proof of it, not just because it's a good sounding idea. Remember, we said against the Yetzer Hara in the land of Mishpat, we have to have strong proofs. So now we have actually a strong proof that we need to pray, because this will convert any situation to that all the dinim will be holy, whether or not we realize that they're a dinim at all. So again, the message has not really changed. We just have to be smart enough to know that we have to always pray. If I ever feel that I don't have to pray in a certain situation, it's just because I'm not being really that smart about it.